Greetings and welcome back to Gothic Homemaking. You might remember a while back I did an unboxing video because I received a box of Halloween goodies from Joann Fabric and Craft stores. Well, inside of that box, one of the items was a Funkin. I had no idea what a Funkin was. I'd never seen one before. Well, apparently it's some kind of carvable foam pumpkin. Now, I know I'm going to lose some Goth points for saying this, but I'm not particularly good at carving jack-o'-lanterns. So carving a foam one, I was even more trepidatious about that. But I thought it might be fun to give it a try. Take a look. Now, because this pumpkin is black and not a traditional orange pumpkin, it could really be anything. So I decided that my design would be inspired by my character Hargoyle from my book, The Legend of Candy Claus. I always say that Hargoyle has the body of a frog, the wings of a bat, and the face of a cat. So you could use this same design if you're making, say, a black cat on your Funkin. Now, I wouldn't want to go in without a plan, so the first thing I did was I drew my design on the Funkin with a pencil. Earlier in the Halloween season, I picked up this pumpkin carving set, so I was curious to see if these would work on the Funkin. For starters, I pulled out this hole puncher and I punched holes in the corners of the nose. This allows for you to take a blade, like this one, and get in there and start cutting. There were two blades in my pumpkin carving set, and I found the one with the finer teeth worked best on the foam. The one with the thicker teeth caused a lot of friction, and the foam is actually quite thin and fragile, so you have to be careful. After I cut out the nose, I decided I might want to get into the bottom of the pumpkin, so I put a hole saw attachment on my drill and made a hole in the bottom. Next, I started cutting out the mouth, and then it hit me that I could probably use my Dremel tool to do the same job. With a cutting disc attachment on my Dremel tool, I was really able to cut into the foam very easily. It really cuts through like butter. But unfortunately, it's also easier to make a mistake with that powerful tool in your hand, so you have to be cautious. Once the mouth was cut, I popped it out. I'm going to be using this for something else later. Now, while a real pumpkin is full of seeds, and while you're cutting it, it's wet and it's messy, it creates a messy situation, a Funkin is completely hollow and it's dry, so there's none of that. But it does present another problem because while you're cutting it, it creates a lot of foam dust, so you're constantly cleaning up foam dust through the process. Next, I took my drill and I drilled some holes for the highlights of the eyes. When you're working on a jack-o'-lantern, you're kind of working in the negative, right? Because the parts that you cut away, if there's a light inside, those are going to be the brightest. So I tried to keep that in mind while I was working on my design. I used the cutting disc attachment on my Dremel tool to cut out the eyes. While the Dremel tool is certainly very powerful and handy, sometimes I found it easier to do with the saw. As you can see, the foam is very thin, so you have to be very careful not to crack it while you're sawing at it. And there's one of the eyes cut out. Next, with a sanding attachment on my Dremel tool, I decided it was time to start doing a little shading. Using this attachment, I sanded away only the exterior black surface, exposing the yellow foam underneath. This technique gives the pumpkin a really lovely two-tone appearance. I also used the sanding attachment to clean up some of my lines. Next, with an engraving bit on my Dremel tool, I started to carve designs into the Funkin, like this tuft of hair at the top of the forehead. After a while, I felt more comfortable with the Dremel tool and I started to make some fur designs. Now this is really coming along. Okay, remember that mouthpiece I cut out? Well, it's time to cut the teeth out of it. For that, I used an Exakto knife. This foam is actually really easy to cut through, and I found that a sharp Exakto knife does a great job. Finally, I cut out all of my teeth. Next, with the Exakto knife, I peeled off the black exterior to expose the foam underneath. As I mentioned, the Exakto knife was very sharp, and hence, there was indeed a blood offering to the Pumpkin King. With a sanding attachment on the Dremel tool, I rounded the teeth so they looked more natural. Now, Candy Claus has a candy corn grin, so to that end, I got some acrylic paints and I painted orange, yellow, and white onto the teeth to make them look like candy corns. And in no time, I had my candy corn grill. I decided I would also paint the eyelids gray. And to match my character's appearance, I painted the eyes an orangish yellow. I'd probably never think to paint a real pumpkin. With a glue gun, I attached my candy corn teeth to the Funkin. Just look at that sweet smile. I applied some clear nail polish to give the teeth a shiny appearance. Lastly, just to see how it would look lit up, I put my cell phone with a flashlight app under the Funkin. And now you can really see it light up. And this is what it looks like with a bicycle light inside. Remember that these things are made of foam, so you should never put an open flame inside of one. And there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed watching my maiden voyage carving a Funkin. Not too shabby for a first time, I think. But I think if I made more of them, I would definitely get the hang of it. I love that you can paint on it and you can glue things to it as well as carve it. And unlike a real pumpkin, which is going to deteriorate and rot, this is going to pretty much stay this way. You can display it year after year, and there's literally nothing that you need to do to keep this looking this awesome forever and ever.
More blood!
Gege!